Maria Santos stood at the edge of the military recruitment office, her small hands gripping the doorframe. At 17, she barely reached 5 feet tall, with gentle brown eyes that seemed too kind for the world of warfare. The year was 1943, and World War II raged across Europe and the Pacific. Her 3 brothers had already shipped out to fight, leaving behind only faded photographs and promises to return home. The recruiting sergeant looked up from his paperwork, his weathered face breaking into what he thought was a friendly smile. Behind him, several other soldiers paused their conversations to watch the tiny girl who had just walked into their domain. Maria's worn dress and scuffed shoes told the story of a family struggling to make ends meet during wartime. "Can I help you, miss?" the sergeant asked, already assuming she was looking for information about a boyfriend or relative. "Are you here to ask about someone who enlisted?" Maria straightened her shoulders and walked directly to his desk. Her voice, though soft, carried a determination that surprised everyone in the room. "I want to join the army, sir. I want to fight for my country." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam breaking, laughter erupted throughout the office. Soldiers slapped their knees and wiped tears from their eyes. The sergeant's friendly demeanor shifted to barely contained amusement as he tried to maintain some semblance of professionalism. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "the army isn't a place for little girls. Why don't you run along home to your mother? Maybe take up knitting or nursing if you want to help with the war effort." But Maria didn't move. She had heard these words before, in different forms, throughout her entire life. Too small for sports. Too quiet. For leadership too young to understand the real world. Every dismissal had only strengthened her resolve. "My brothers are fighting," she said simply. "My father died in the First War. My mother works 16-hour days at the munitions factory. I can shoot better than most men in my town, and I'm not afraid to prove it." This declaration brought another wave of laughter, even louder than the first. One soldier called out, "What are you going to do? Throw rocks at the enemy?" Another added, "Maybe she can scare them away with her tiny fists." The sergeant leaned back in his chair, thoroughly entertained. "Listen, little lady, even if we were desperate enough to consider it, which we're not, you'd need to pass physical requirements that would break you in half. The army needs soldiers, not children playing dress-up." Maria's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Give me the tests, all of them. If I fail, I'll leave quietly. If I pass, you give me the same chance as any man who walks through that door." The laughter died down to chuckles, but the dismissive atmosphere remained thick in the air. The sergeant was about to respond with another rejection when the office door opened with such force that it slammed against the wall. Everyone in the room immediately snapped to attention as General Harrison McKenna strode through the entrance. His uniform was immaculate, his silver hair perfectly groomed, and his steel-gray eyes missed nothing as they swept across the scene. At 62, he commanded respect simply by breathing, and his reputation as one of the Army's most brilliant tactical minds preceded him wherever he went. "What exactly is going on here?" His voice cut through the tension like a blade. The sergeant stammered, "Sir, just a young lady with some unrealistic ideas about military service. We were explaining why she needs to find a more appropriate way to contribute to the war effort." General McKenna's gaze settled on Maria, who met his eyes without flinching. Something in her steady stare reminded him of soldiers he had known, soldiers who had saved his life and the lives of countless others through sheer determination and skill. "And what unrealistic ideas might those be?" he asked, his tone neutral, but his attention focused entirely on the small figure standing before him. "She wants to join the army, sir," the sergeant explained, unable to keep the amusement out of his voice. "Claims she can shoot better than most men. We were just explaining the obvious reasons why that's impossible." The general studied Maria for a long moment, noting the calluses on her hands, the steady way she held herself despite being surrounded by skeptics, and the quiet fire in her eyes. These were not the characteristics of someone seeking attention or playing games. "What's your name, miss?" he asked. "Maria Santos, sir." "And why do you want to join the army, Miss Santos?" Maria took a breath, choosing her words carefully. Because my country is at war, sir. Because I have skills that could help. Because sitting at home while others fight and die doesn't feel right to me. The room fell completely silent. Even the soldiers who had been laughing moments before seemed to sense that something significant was happening. General McKenna walked closer to Maria, his experienced eyes taking in details that the others had missed. What kind of shooting experience do you have? I've been hunting since I was 8, sir. My father taught me before he died. I can hit a rabbit at 200 yards and I've never missed a deer I've aimed at. I know it's not the same as combat, but I understand weapons, distances, and how to stay calm under pressure. The general nodded slowly. Interesting. Sergeant, what's our policy on testing applicants who request it? The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. Well, sir, regulations state that any potential recruit should be given the opportunity to prove their capabilities through standard testing procedures, but no buts, Sergeant. Miss Santos has made a reasonable request. She wants to be tested. Are you telling me that this office is incapable of administering standard recruitment evaluations? The silence stretched until it became almost painful. Every person in the room understood that something important was happening, though none of them could have predicted what would come next. 3 days later, Maria arrived at the testing facility before dawn. She had borrowed her brother's old work clothes, the only practical outfit she owned, and braided her long black hair tightly against her head. The fabric hung loose on her small frame, but her movements were precise and confident as she approached the group of male recruits already assembled for evaluation. The other potential soldiers ranged in age from 18 to 35, all of them significantly larger and seemingly stronger than the small figure who joined their ranks. Several whispered among themselves, pointing and shaking their heads in obvious disbelief. Others simply stared, unsure what to make of the situation. Sergeant Phillips, a different officer than the one from the recruitment office, held a clipboard and surveyed his group with professional efficiency. When his eyes fell on Maria, he paused, clearly having heard about the unusual addition to today's testing roster. "Gentlemen," he announced, then caught himself, "and Miss, today's evaluation will test your physical fitness, mental acuity, weapons handling, and ability to follow orders under stress. Anyone who cannot complete any portion of the testing will be dismissed immediately. No exceptions, no second chances." The physical fitness portion began with a 5-mile run through rough terrain. Maria positioned herself in the middle of the group, neither pushing to the front nor lagging behind. Her shorter legs meant she had to take more steps than the men around her, but her breathing remained steady and controlled. Years of chasing rabbits through dense forest and hauling water from distant wells had built an endurance that wasn't immediately obvious to observers. By mile 3, several of the larger recruits were struggling. Their faces had turned red, and their confident strides had deteriorated into labored shuffling. Maria maintained her pace, her expression focused but calm. When they reached the halfway point, she was positioned solidly in the middle of the pack, having passed 2 men who were now walking. The return portion of the run proved even more challenging. The morning sun had grown hot, and the rocky path seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. One by one, more recruits fell behind, their initial confidence shattered by the relentless pace. Maria continued forward, her breathing steady, her steps sure. When they crossed the finish line, Maria placed 7th out of the original 23 recruits. 6 men had dropped out entirely, unable to complete the distance, and several others finished well behind her. The expression on Sergeant Phillips's face showed his surprise, though he tried to hide it behind professional neutrality. The physical strength tests came next: push-ups, pull-ups, and carrying heavy packs across varied terrain. Maria's performance was methodical and determined. She couldn't match the raw power of the strongest men, but she completed every required repetition and carried her assigned weight without complaint or rest. During the pack-carrying exercise, she developed a technique of shifting the weight systematically to prevent any one muscle group from becoming overwhelmed. While other recruits struggled with increasingly shaky arms or unsteady legs, Maria maintained her balance and continued moving forward at a consistent pace. Not bad for someone who shouldn't be here, muttered one of the recruits as they moved toward the next testing station. The mental acuity portion included map reading, tactical problem solving, and quick decision-making scenarios. Maria excelled in these areas, her answers clear and well-reasoned. Years of planning hunting routes and tracking animals through complex terrain had developed her spatial reasoning and analytical skills far beyond what anyone expected. When presented with a scenario involving enemy troop movements and limited ammunition, she provided a solution that impressed even the testing officers. Her approach balanced aggressive action with careful resource management, showing an understanding of warfare that seemed to come from something deeper than textbook knowledge. But everyone knew the real test would come at the shooting range. The weapons training facility buzzed with anticipation as word spread about the small recruit who had somehow made it through the initial phases of testing. Officers who had no official reason to be there found excuses to observe the proceedings. Even General McKenna appeared at the edge of the range, though he maintained a careful distance from the actual testing area. Sergeant Phillips distributed rifles to the remaining recruits, explaining the qualification requirements. Each person would fire at targets from various distances, 50 yards, 100 yards, and 200 yards. They would be scored on accuracy, consistency, and ability to adjust their aim based on wind and other environmental factors. The male recruits stepped up to the firing line with varying degrees of confidence. Some had hunting experience, others had never held a rifle before enlisting. The results were predictably mixed: a few excellent scores, several adequate performances, and some failures that would result in immediate dismissal from consideration. Throughout the testing, Maria waited patiently, observing how each person handled their weapon and noting the wind patterns and light conditions. She watched the way some recruits gripped their rifles too tightly, causing their hands to shake, and how others failed to properly account for the slight crosswind that had developed. When her name was called, the entire range fell silent. Even the ongoing conversations among observers stopped as everyone focused their attention on the small figure walking toward the firing line. Maria accepted her rifle from Sergeant Phillips, checking its weight and balance with practiced movements. Her hands moved over the weapon with familiarity, adjusting the sling and testing the trigger pull. These were not the nervous fumbling of someone unfamiliar with firearms, but the confident actions of someone who understood exactly what she was holding. She settled into position, taking her time to establish a stable shooting stance. Her breathing slowed and her entire body seemed to become perfectly still. The first target stood 50 yards away, well within the range she had been shooting since childhood. The crack of her rifle split the morning air, followed immediately by calls from the spotters confirming a direct hit in the center ring. Maria made a small adjustment to her position and fired again. Another perfect shot. As they moved to the 100-yard targets, murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. Her performance at the closer distance had been impressive, but many good shooters could handle 50 yards. The real test would come, with increased distance and more challenging conditions. Maria's shots at 100 yards were equally precise, grouping tightly in the center of her targets. Her movements remained calm and methodical, each shot following the same careful ritual of positioning, breathing, and gentle trigger squeeze that her father had drilled into her years before. The 200-yard targets represented the final challenge. At this distance, even experienced marksmen sometimes struggled with accuracy. The wind had picked up slightly, and the afternoon light created shadows that could confuse depth perception. Maria studied the conditions carefully, noting the way the grass moved in the wind and adjusting her aim accordingly. Her first shot struck the outer ring of the bullseye, a solid hit that would have satisfied most observers. But Maria frowned slightly, making a minute adjustment to her position. Her second shot struck dead center. Her third shot struck dead center. Her fourth shot struck so close to dead center that the spotters had to use binoculars to confirm. It was a separate hole from the previous round. When the final scores were calculated, Maria had achieved the highest marksmanship rating of any recruit tested that day. More importantly, she had done so with a consistency and composure that impressed every military professional present. The weeks following Maria's successful testing passed in a blur of paperwork, medical examinations, and bureaucratic hurdles that seemed designed to discourage her from pursuing military service. Each office she visited presented new obstacles, new reasons why her enlistment was problematic, new forms that required signatures from supervisors who were mysteriously unavailable. Maria navigated each challenge with the same quiet determination she had shown during testing. When told that female recruits needed different physical standards, she requested to be held to male standards instead. When informed that housing arrangements would be complicated, she offered to find her own accommodations. When presented with waivers and liability forms, she signed them without hesitation. Throughout this process, General McKenna observed from a distance, occasionally making quiet inquiries about her progress. His interest puzzled many of his subordinates, but none questioned his decisions. The general's reputation for identifying exceptional soldiers was well established, and his recommendations carried enormous weight throughout the military hierarchy. During this same period, disturbing intelligence reports began reaching McKenna's office. German forces in occupied France were developing new defensive strategies that traditional Allied approaches seemed unable to counter. Enemy snipers had inflicted devastating casualties on recent reconnaissance missions, and conventional assault tactics were proving increasingly costly and ineffective. The situation was particularly dire in the mountainous regions of southeastern France, where German positions commanded excellent fields of fire and Allied forces found themselves pinned down by accurate enemy shooting. Multiple attempts to neutralize these positions had failed, resulting in significant casualties and operational delays that threatened larger strategic objectives. McKenna studied the reports late into the night, mapping enemy positions and analyzing failed mission data. The pattern was clear. The Germans had positioned their most skilled marksmen in locations that maximized their advantages while minimizing Allied options for counterattack. Traditional solutions, artillery bombardment, frontal assault, flanking, maneuvers, had all been tried and found wanting. What they needed was someone who could match the enemy's shooting skills while bringing tactical advantages the Germans wouldn't expect. Someone small enough to move through terrain that would expose larger soldiers. Someone skilled enough to make shots that would eliminate key targets from distances that seemed impossible. Someone like Maria Santos. The idea was audacious, possibly even reckless. Using a female soldier in combat operations was virtually unprecedented, and the political ramifications could be severe if things went wrong. But McKenna had built his career on making difficult decisions in impossible situations, and every instinct told him that conventional approaches would continue to fail. He requested Maria's complete testing records and spent hours reviewing her scores, her psychological evaluations, and the detailed reports from her training officers. Every metric supported his growing conviction that she represented exactly the kind of unconventional solution that the current crisis demanded. More importantly, follow-up interviews with her testing supervisors revealed qualities that went beyond mere shooting accuracy. She adapted quickly to new situations, remained calm under pressure, and showed an intuitive understanding of tactical principles that usually took years to develop. Sergeant Phillips had written in his report, "Recruit, Santos displays exceptional composure and learning ability. Her performance under stress was superior to most experienced soldiers. Recommend immediate consideration for advanced training programs." The weapons instructor had noted, "Santos handles firearms with skill level far exceeding her age and apparent experience. Her natural understanding of ballistics and environmental factors suggests significant potential for specialized marksmanship roles." Even more telling were the informal comments from other testing participants. Several recruits had mentioned her helpful advice during training exercises, her willingness to assist struggling teammates, and her ability to remain focused while others became frustrated or discouraged. McKenna called for a private meeting with Maria to discuss possibilities that extended far beyond standard military service. When she entered his office, he was struck again by the contrast between her small physical presence and the confident way she carried herself. "Miss Santos," he began, "your test results have been exceptional in every category. However, I want to discuss opportunities that would involve considerably more risk than typical military assignments. Maria sat straight in her chair, her attention completely focused on his words. What kind of opportunities, sir? Specialized missions behind enemy lines. Operations that would require you to work independently, often without backup or support. Assignments where failure could mean capture, torture, or death, and where success could save hundreds of Allied lives. The weight of his words settled in the room like a heavy blanket. Maria considered them carefully before responding, and McKenna appreciated that she took time to think rather than giving an immediate answer. Would these missions make a real difference in winning the war? She asked finally. They could, but I need to be completely honest with you about what you would be facing. The enemy has snipers positioned in locations that our regular forces cannot effectively counter. These positions are causing significant casualties and preventing important operations from succeeding. McKenna pulled out a detailed map, pointing to several marked locations in French mountain territory. These positions need to be eliminated, but conventional approaches have failed repeatedly. What we need is someone with exceptional shooting skills who can approach these targets from angles the enemy doesn't expect. Maria studied the map intently, her finger tracing possible approach routes and noting elevation changes and natural cover. Her questions revealed a tactical understanding that impressed McKenna even more than her shooting scores had. How would I get to these positions without being detected? She asked. That would be part of your specialized training. You would learn advanced fieldcraft, including camouflage, silent movement, and survival techniques that would allow you to operate independently for extended periods. And after I complete the missions? If successful, you would likely receive additional assignments of similar importance. The war effort needs people with your particular combination of skills. Maria was quiet for several minutes, continuing to study the map and consider the implications of what the general was proposing. McKenna waited patiently, recognizing that she was working through the same kind of tactical analysis that had impressed her training officers. Sir, she said finally, if I can help end this war faster and save lives, then I want to try. When would I begin this specialized training? McKenna smiled, the first time she had seen him display any emotion other than professional seriousness. Immediately. But first, there's something else you need to understand about the nature of these missions. He opened a classified folder and removed several photographs showing German sniper positions and the terrain surrounding them. The enemy marksmen we need to eliminate are not ordinary soldiers. They are specialists, many of them with years of combat experience and dozens of confirmed kills. The photographs revealed sophisticated camouflaged positions, carefully constructed firing lanes, and evidence of tactical intelligence that spoke to highly skilled opponents. Maria examined each image carefully, noting details that would be important for approaching such positions undetected. These men have been chosen specifically for their shooting ability and their knowledge of defensive tactics. McKenna continued. Eliminating them will require not just exceptional marksmanship, but also fieldcraft skills that take most soldiers years to master. How long do I have to learn these skills? Maria asked. 6 weeks. After that, you'll be deployed to France. The timeline was incredibly compressed even by wartime standards. Most specialized training programs took months to complete, and the skills McKenna was describing typically required extensive experience to master. But Maria simply nodded. Then we should start immediately. McKenna stood and walked to his window, looking out at the training grounds where regular recruits practiced basic military skills. What he was proposing went far beyond anything those soldiers would face. There's one more thing, Miss Santos. The designation for this type of specialized operative is classified, but you should know what you're training to become. He turned back to face her, his expression serious and respectful. The code name for soldiers with your particular mission profile is Black Talon. It represents the highest level of independent operative training in the Allied forces. Maria felt a chill of recognition and pride. She had asked for the chance to serve her country, and now she was being offered an opportunity to make a difference that could affect the entire course of the war. The Black Talon training facility was hidden deep in the mountains of Colorado, accessible only by unmarked roads that seemed to lead nowhere. Maria arrived in an unmarked truck driven by a silent soldier who offered no conversation during the 3-hour journey from the nearest town. The landscape grew increasingly remote and rugged as they climbed toward their destination. When they finally stopped, Maria found herself looking at what appeared to be an abandoned mining camp. Weathered. Wooden buildings dotted the mountainside, connected by dirt paths that looked like they hadn't been maintained in decades. Only the subtle presence of armed guards and carefully concealed communication equipment revealed that this was actually one of the military's most secret training locations. Colonel James Morrison emerged from the largest building to greet her. Arrival. At 55, he moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades in military service, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a natural teacher. He had personally trained dozens of specialized operatives, and his methods had contributed to some of the war's most successful covert operations. "Welcome to Nowhere, Santos," he said simply. "For the next 6 weeks, this place will be your entire world. You'll eat here, sleep here, and learn skills here that most soldiers never imagine exist." The first week focused entirely on physical conditioning that went far beyond standard military fitness. Maria learned to move silently across different types of terrain, from rocky mountainsides to dense forests to urban environments. Each surface required different techniques, different ways of placing her feet and distributing her weight. Her instructor for fieldcraft was Sergeant Elena Vasquez, a woman who had spent 2 years operating behind German lines in Yugoslavia before being recalled to train new operatives. Vasquez was only slightly taller than Maria, but she moved through the wilderness like a ghost, appearing and disappearing with a skill that seemed almost supernatural. "Size is an advantage in this work," Vasquez explained during one of their pre-dawn training sessions. "Big men make noise, cast shadows, and need more food and water. Small people can hide in places where others can't even think of going." They practiced moving through thick underbrush without disturbing branches, crossing streams without creating ripples, and climbing rocky surfaces without dislodging stones. Every movement had to be deliberate and controlled, every step planned, 3 moves ahead. The camouflage training proved equally demanding. Maria learned to use natural materials to break up her silhouette, to blend with shadows and terrain features, and to remain motionless for hours at a time. The techniques required not just physical skill but mental discipline that tested her patience and concentration. "A sniper's greatest weapon isn't their rifle," Vasquez taught. "It's their ability to become invisible, to be present without being detected, to observe without being observed." Weapons training with Colonel Morrison took her shooting skills to entirely new levels. The rifles she learned to use were precision instruments far beyond anything she had encountered before. Each weapon was customized for specific missions, adjusted for particular ranges and environmental conditions. But more challenging than mastering the weapons was learning to calculate shots under combat conditions. Morrison taught her to account for wind speed and direction, temperature variations, humidity levels, and even the rotation of the earth for extremely long-distance shots. "Hunting rabbits is about instinct and experience," he explained, while adjusting her scope settings. "Combat shooting is about mathematics and precision. You need to know exactly why each shot will hit where it hits before you pull the trigger." They practiced at ranges that stretched her abilities to their limits. Targets at 300 yards became routine. Shots at 400 yards required careful calculation, but were achievable with proper technique. At 500 yards, she was hitting targets that experienced military marksmen would consider challenging. The mental training proved as demanding as the physical skills. Maria learned to read maps with professional surveyor accuracy, to navigate using stars and natural landmarks, and to estimate distances and elevations with precision that could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Radio communication protocols occupied entire days of instruction. She memorized dozens of code phrases, learned to operate different types of communication equipment, and practiced sending messages that conveyed critical information in minimal transmission time. "Every second you're on the radio is a second the enemy might use to locate your position," her communications instructor explained. "Your messages need to be quick, accurate, and impossible to misinterpret. Intelligence analysis became another crucial skill. Maria learned to observe enemy positions and extract tactically important information from seemingly minor details. The size of cooking fires could indicate troop numbers. The timing of guard changes might reveal operational schedules. The condition of equipment could suggest supply line problems. Week 3 introduced urban combat scenarios that tested everything she had learned in entirely different environments. The training ground included mock buildings, city streets, and industrial facilities that replicated the types of environments she might encounter in occupied France. Moving through urban terrain required completely different techniques than wilderness operations. Shadows fell differently between buildings. Sounds carried in unexpected ways. Potential hiding places existed in 3 dimensions, rather than just ground-level variations. Cities are full of people who might see you, Morrison explained, as they reviewed her performance after a particularly challenging exercise. In the wilderness, you only worry about enemy soldiers. In towns, every civilian is a potential security risk. The final weeks brought everything together in comprehensive mission simulations that tested her complete skill set. Maria found herself dropped into unfamiliar terrain with minimal equipment, tasked with reaching specific objectives while avoiding numerous enemy positions staffed by experienced soldiers whose job was to detect and capture intruders. These exercises pushed her to her physical and mental limits. She spent entire nights moving through difficult terrain, reached shooting positions just as dawn provided enough light for accurate fire, and then had to extract from target areas while pursuit teams searched for her location. Her performance impressed even the most experienced instructors. Colonel Morrison noted in his final report, "Recruit Santos has mastered advanced fieldcraft and marksmanship skills in a time frame that typically requires months of training. Her natural abilities, combined with exceptional dedication and learning capacity, make her suitable for the most challenging independent operations." On the final day of training, General McKenna arrived at the facility to observe Maria's graduation exercise. The scenario was designed to replicate the actual mission conditions she would face in France, a heavily defended enemy position that needed to be eliminated by a single operative working without backup. Maria began her approach before dawn, moving through terrain that included rocky slopes, dense vegetation, and open areas where detection would mean automatic failure. Her route to the target required a 3-mile movement through territory patrolled by instructors who knew every possible approach. She reached her shooting position undetected, just as the morning light provided visibility for accurate fire. The target was a camouflaged position 400 yards away, occupied by an instructor who represented a German sniper. She had one shot to eliminate the target before pursuit teams would begin searching for her position. Her shot was perfect, striking the target precisely in the center. Within seconds, she was moving away from her firing position, beginning the extraction phase of the exercise that would test her ability to escape from an area where enemy forces were actively searching. 45 minutes later, she reached the designated extraction point without being detected by any of the pursuit teams. Her performance had been flawless from beginning to end. General McKenna approached her as she cleaned her rifle after the exercise. "Congratulations, Agent Santos. You are now qualified for Black Talon operations. Your first mission briefing will take place tomorrow morning." Maria looked up from her weapon, her expression serious but determined. "I'm ready, sir." McKenna studied her for a moment, seeing not the small girl who had walked into the recruitment office months before, but a highly trained operative capable of missions that could influence the course of the war. "Yes," he said quietly, "I believe you are." The briefing room was smaller than Maria had expected, containing only a single table surrounded by chairs and walls covered with detailed maps of southeastern France. General McKenna sat across from her, accompanied by Colonel Morrison and a man she hadn't met before who wore civilian clothes but carried himself with obvious military bearing. "This is Agent Thompson from the Office of Strategic Services," McKenna explained. "He's been coordinating intelligence gathering in your target area for the past several months." Thompson spread aerial photographs across the table, each image showing German defensive positions from different angles and elevations. The quality of the intelligence was remarkable, revealing details about enemy fortifications that would be crucial for mission planning. The situation has worsened since we first discussed this operation, Thompson began. German snipers in these mountain positions have killed 43 Allied soldiers in the past month alone. 2 separate attempts to neutralize these positions using conventional assault tactics have failed, costing us additional casualties. Maria studied the photographs carefully, noting the sophisticated nature of the German defensive preparations. The enemy had chosen their positions with expert understanding of terrain advantages and fields of fire. Each location commanded multiple approach routes while providing excellent cover for the defenders. "How many primary targets are we talking about?" she asked. 5 confirmed sniper positions, McKenna replied, pointing to marked locations on the largest map. Each one is manned by experienced German marksmen who have been specifically selected for their shooting skills and knowledge of the local terrain. Thompson pulled out additional intelligence materials, including detailed dossiers on the enemy personnel. These aren't ordinary soldiers. Hans Müller, the senior sniper, has over 60 confirmed kills and has been operating in this area for 8 months. Klaus Weber has extensive experience from the Russian front. Erich Brenner was an Olympic shooting competitor before the war. The profiles painted a picture of highly skilled opponents who would not be easy to surprise or outmaneuver. Each man had survived months of combat operations, suggesting tactical intelligence and survival instincts that would make them extremely dangerous adversaries. "Your mission," McKenna continued, "is to eliminate these 5 targets within a 2-week operational window. Allied forces are planning a major offensive that depends on neutralizing these German positions before our main advance begins." Maria absorbed this information while continuing to study the intelligence materials. The timeline was tight, the targets were skilled, and the stakes were enormous. Everything she had learned during her training would be tested under the most challenging possible conditions. "How do I reach the operational area?" she asked. "Parachute insertion 30 miles behind enemy lines," Thompson explained. "A French resistance cell will meet you at the landing zone and provide local support, including safe houses and intelligence updates about German patrol patterns." The insertion plan was risky but necessary. Conventional infiltration routes were too heavily guarded, and the remote mountain terrain made vehicle transportation impossible. A parachute drop would place her closest to her targets while avoiding most German security measures. "What about extraction after the mission is complete?" "Same resistance network will guide you to a pickup point where a small aircraft can land briefly to collect you. The extraction is scheduled for 14 days after insertion, regardless of mission status." This meant she would have exactly 2 weeks to eliminate 5 highly skilled enemy snipers while operating alone in hostile territory. If she failed to reach the extraction point on schedule, there would be no second chance for rescue. Colonel Morrison opened the equipment case containing the specialized gear she would carry on the mission. The rifle was a precision instrument unlike anything she had trained with before, custom-built for extreme accuracy at long ranges. Each component had been selected and adjusted for her specific physical requirements. "This weapon is capable of accurate fire out to 800 yards under optimal conditions," Morrison explained. "The scope includes range-finding capabilities and ballistic calculators that will help with shot placement. You'll carry 60 rounds of ammunition, which means every shot must count." Additional equipment included camouflage materials, survival gear, medical supplies, communication equipment, and maps showing detailed topographic features of her operational area. The total weight was manageable, but every item had been chosen for maximum utility and minimum space. Thompson spread out the mission timeline, showing how her activities would coordinate with broader Allied operations. "German positions must be eliminated no later than day 12 of your insertion. Our offensive begins on day 15, which gives us a small buffer for unexpected complications." The precision required was daunting. Maria would need to locate each target, plan individual approaches that avoided detection, execute perfect shots under combat conditions, and then move to subsequent targets without being caught by German search teams. "What kind of resistance support can I expect?" she asked. "Limited but crucial," Thompson replied. "Local contacts will provide updated intelligence about German patrol schedules and any changes to target locations. They can also offer emergency shelter if you need to avoid search parties. However, he emphasized that her primary protection would come from remaining undetected rather than relying on local assistance. The resistance network was valuable but small, and exposure of their activities could compromise both her mission and their ongoing operations. General McKenna leaned forward, his expression serious. "Maria, I need you to understand that this mission represents one of the most challenging assignments any Allied operative has attempted. The combination of skilled targets, hostile territory, and tight timeline creates risks that extend far beyond normal combat operations." She nodded, appreciating his honesty while feeling confidence in her training and preparation. Everything she had learned during the past 6 weeks had been designed to prepare her for exactly this type of mission. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow night. Weather conditions will be optimal for insertion, and German patrol patterns suggest minimal enemy presence in your landing area." The briefing continued for several hours.